They decided to give him a placebo instead of medicine, and indeed Jacek, after being given the placebo... Hello, welcome to another episode of Criminal Patrol. Today, a story from Służewo. Służewo is a small town in the Kujawian-Pomeranian Voivodeship near Aleksandrów Kujawski, a peaceful, quiet village. Usually we look at what's happening in big cities through the lens of various types of crime or major scandals. These are places where usually nothing happens, hundreds, thousands of such small towns in Poland. People in such towns always think that things are happening everywhere else, but here it's peaceful. And I would say that the usual rhythm of that day, of that village, of those meetings, of that morning was disrupted in such a drastic, extraordinary way. I invite you to watch the next episode. That poison was in the stomach, in the intestines, and in the lungs. The man lived under one roof with a deadly threat, his own wife. The woman performed chemical experiments on her husband to get rid of him, with a surprising motive. It was a whole series of different kinds of experiments because they did the same thing every time. I mean the same thing in the sense that they prepared those deadly sandwiches for him. Be sure to watch this special episode of Criminal Patrol, which is not publicly available. Subscribe to us now on Hero Co. Criminalny Patrol, which is the platform where we will regularly publish additional exclusive materials not publicly available every first Tuesday of the month. In addition to bonus reports, you can also watch regular weekly episodes of Criminal Patrol there, but without ads. Go to our profile now at Hero Code Criminalny Patrol. Madness, and it was like that, and it was such madness, and it was such madness, and it was... It's a December morning in 2010. There are still a few days left until Christmas. Somewhere out there, housewives are already thinking about Christmas, about what delicious dishes they'll prepare for the holiday table. Children are thinking about the winter break because it's usually a few days off, but there's still plenty of time left. That was December 8th. On that day, as usual, 14-year-old Ewelina goes to school. Despite the fact that it's December and the weather conditions are quite difficult, there are still quite a few people riding their bikes. That's also the case for Ewelina, this 14-year-old girl. She gets on her bike, a red folding one, and around 7:15 she rides to school. Ewelina, as she says, or as her father used to say about her, is like Quicksilver, a child, a treasure. She does very well in school. She even helped the neighbor with his homework. She's everywhere, full of energy, a lively girl who is the apple of her parents' eye, so her parents are simply proud of her. This Ewelina gets on her bike and rides to school. This is December 8th for this family. For Ewelina's family, it's also a bit of a sad day because Ewelina had a twin sister. I say twin sister, but that twin sister lived only 2 days. She was born on December 6th and died on December 8th. On that December 8th, or of course 14 years later, Ewelina gets on her bike and rides to school, but the problem is that Ewelina never made it to school. She disappeared. It was just a 2-kilometer route. She had to travel 2 kilometers, which in the conditions of this town is a short distance. Over that distance, well, usually people meet, many people ride bikes, people drive cars, some stop to talk because that's the custom of people from the countryside. Even though it seemed impossible, Ewelina disappeared somewhere along that short stretch. Well, after some time, Ewelina's bike was found. It was just lying in a ditch. The children were coming back from school. They saw that the bike was lying there, presumably realized it was Ewelina's bike, and informed their mother. One of the mothers, who then informed Ewelina's family. It looked like the bike had been hit by a car. Obviously, everything indicated that there had been some kind of unfortunate accident, that Ewelina was simply riding that bike. Some driver hit the bike and there was an accident, but there was no body anywhere. Ewelina was nowhere to be found. The search began and the police were notified. It was winter, December, good conditions for a thermal imaging camera, so they even brought in a helicopter with such a thermal imaging camera. The search began. People gathered, they came, and people from the village and neighbors, firefighters came, and the military was also brought to the scene. This area is quite vast because there are fields and forests all around, so it's a difficult area to search. But they searched. The search began. At first the area was even expanded, but there was no trace of Ewelina. She was nowhere to be found. And of course, during these routine procedures, the police did what should be done in such a situation, like checking the hospitals, for example. Because maybe she was taken to the hospital by that driver, maybe she lost her memory. Well, everything was possible. They took pictures, showed Ewelina's photos on television, but there was no trace, no response, and it just wasn't known what happened to Ewelina. The days went by and Christmas Eve was approaching. Ewelina's family sat down at the table and left that empty seat. Traditionally, it's for someone who might come, but in this case, that empty chair was probably for Ewelina. The family thought that maybe a miracle would happen and the child would come home, but the miracle didn't happen. That chair remained empty and no one knew what happened to Ewelina. People in the village, of course, speculated and wondered what could have happened. After all, a person, a child, doesn't just disappear basically in the middle of the village in such a way that no one knows what happened to her. She was already a 14-year-old girl. Various hypotheses were considered, different versions, but people also suspected that maybe someone was behind it, someone from the village, someone who might have even come and taken part in the search. They looked at each other suspiciously. As is usually the case in situations like this, the family went to a clairvoyant and brought various items. He had a vision. Well, after this vision, or did he even ask them to leave before that? From the room, only Ewelina's sister stayed with their mother. And here, the clairvoyant, without any hesitation, said directly that Ewelina lived only 2 hours. He stated that the girl was dead, that she had been murdered. He even pointed out a certain place where the body might be. The police searched that place, but it wasn't confirmed. Nothing was found there. Nevertheless, the thought that Ewelina's child is dead remained in the minds of the whole family. There is always hope, and that hope was certainly present in Ewelina's family as well. The clairvoyant himself said that the child was dead and the days kept passing by. It's already the new year. Somewhere people are slowly starting to get used to the idea that maybe this mystery will never be solved. That maybe they'll never find out what really happened to Ewelina, and it will remain a lifelong mystery. January 2011. Mr. Adam is simply a forester. He has his own district. He went on a patrol of his district somewhere near the village of Klewiska, and Mr. Adam is walking through the forest. And his attention was caught by a bird of prey that kept stubbornly staying in one place, flying to one spot and then flying away, then coming back again, and that simply made him curious. He approached that spot, reasoning that there must be something there that interested the bird, and when he got to that place, well, that trauma will definitely stay with him for the rest of his life. At first he found a shoe, and then when he saw what was there, he thought it was just some old discarded forest doll. And then he finally realized that it wasn't a doll but the body of a little girl. So he ran, of course, notified someone and called the police. I would say that just getting there, even though it's difficult because it's a forest, because the terrain is tough. Of course it was complicated because both the technicians and the police officers had to come to the scene and somehow bring the equipment, but that's the least of the problems. Above all, the examination itself was gruesome because the body was badly, I would say, mangled or bitten by wild animals. It's winter, wild animals are looking for food. They simply pulled the body out of the shallow grave, and to put it mildly, wild animals mutilated the body, but in a way that was a terrifying sight. But of course an examination had to be done. One of the police officers found a backpack near the body. He took out some items from the backpack. There were some school supplies, of course, and he also took out a notebook. That notebook was labeled with the name Ewelina. At this point, the police officers were almost 100% certain that this was the body of 14-year-old Ewelina, who had gone missing almost a month earlier. However, she went missing in a town about 20 kilometers away from the place where the body was found. The body, or rather the remains of the body, were transported to the Department of Forensic Medicine. There, of course, an autopsy was performed and an inspection was underway at the scene. Everything clearly indicated that Ewelina, her body, or perhaps she was still alive at that time, was transported by some car. They even found a tire track from that car. The tread was secured and a cast was made, so at that moment some evidence appeared. The sight was so gruesome that the police didn't even allow Ewelina's family or her mother to approach, just so they wouldn't see it. However, more information appeared, and I would say in this situation it was tragic news. Ewelina was dead, and that was terrifying. But it also turned out that before her death, this child, this girl, was brutally raped multiple times. And in the end, this sadistic murderer stabbed her many times, and he did it so many times to be absolutely sure that he had killed the girl. And until now, for almost a month, there hasn't been any breakthrough in the case. No, there was no specific information. There was nothing that could lead to the killer's trail. The police officers verified that day once again. Well, it seemed almost unbelievable that the killers, or the person who hit the girl, because everything indicated that the killer first hit her with a car and then transported her to that place. That this person was someone from outside the village, from outside the area, rather someone unknown, with license plates from another town or another province. They would have stood out, or someone would have noticed something. Despite the early hours, 7 or 8 in the morning, there were already quite a few people up and about that day, taking care of their daily business. But there was no breakthrough, no information, so the police started searching again, looking for something that could be a lead in this situation. And here they came across a certain interesting piece of information. I would say interesting from the perspective of a town where basically nothing ever happens. Because in this town, or near this town where the body was found, a young boy was kidnapped. It turned out that this boy, Jacek, was kidnapped by a group of men. He couldn't really say any details about them, only that he was abducted, kidnapped by them, taken to Włocławek. And there in Włocławek they forced him to pour gasoline on his car and set it on fire. Jacek was deeply affected by this. First, he sent a text message to one of his friends, and the friend informed his parents. They came to the place where he was standing next to the burned car. It looked like everything indicated that he was close to some kind of breakdown, shock, that he needed psychiatric treatment, and he even ended up being treated in a psychiatric hospital. And then when the police verified this information or found it somewhere, Jacek was actually in the psychiatric hospital. The police started analyzing the reasons for this kidnapping. It seemed like this was a strange kidnapping. Of course, it couldn't be ruled out that the kidnappers made a mistake, that they mistook Jacek for someone else, or that it was some kind of, let's call it in quotation marks, a joke. They told him to set the car on fire because their traces were there, to erase those traces. That was, of course, possible. However, Jacek was deeply affected by it. He was in a psychiatric hospital. He was undergoing treatment. He told his family that it was a shock for him. They started checking into Jacek on a daily basis. He was a butcher. He worked at a slaughterhouse. He lived in the town of Dobre near Radziejów, and he didn't stand out in any way. When they started checking him, he seemed like a rather calm guy. He didn't really have any special conflicts with anyone. He had a partner, he had a child, but he had no criminal record. Previously, there was basically nothing you could hold against him. Nothing to suggest that this man could be suspicious. But do you remember? Tire tread marks were secured at the crime scene. Although Jacek's car, that white Peugeot, burned down, the tires remained. The police decided to check if the tread secured at the scene, if the imprint of that tread would match the tread of Jacek's car. They matched. At that time, the expert was working while the police officers went to the psychiatric hospital where Jacek was and started talking to the doctors. This is, I would say, a long-term observation. Fooling the doctors in the long run is rather difficult in a situation like this, when the patient is under their observation every day. Therefore, the doctors began to suspect that this Jacek was not really in any kind of psychological shock, but rather was faking it, or pretending. Was this after some kind of consultation? When the police officers said they suspected him of possibly being involved in Ewelina's death, they decided to give him a placebo instead of medication. And indeed, after being given the placebo, which is, let's say, a substance that's neutral for the body, Jacek felt as if he had actually received pills that was supposed to calm him down. Well, obviously, everything indicated that Jacek was not blameless and that he was arranging this whole situation just to hide in the psychiatric hospital. In the meantime, the expert report on the tire tread also came in, and it turned out that the tread secured at the scene of Ewelina's murder did indeed come from Jacek's car. A few days after Jacek leaves the hospital, he is detained by the police and taken to the station. That's where the interrogations begin, checking his alibi for that day and also informing him that the tire tread is the same. There, Jacek admits that he did in fact hit Ewelina's bicycle with his car, that when she fell, he knocked her out and then put her in the trunk of his Peugeot. No, the girl didn't defend herself. She was a delicate girl, I'd say. She weighed only about 40 kilograms, so she was no match for Jacek. Then he drove off, took her to the area near Chmielnik, raped her there, but fearing responsibility, he took a knife and killed her with it. And then he didn't really know how to get out of this situation. He was afraid of responsibility. He went to Włocławek, poured gasoline on his car there, and set it on fire. And then, of course, he started suggesting illness and a mental breakdown, and he went to the hospital just to hide from the police. Jacek said he didn't mean to, that it was some kind of impulse, that he just saw the little girl on the road. It seems to me that it probably wasn't like that, not on such a short stretch, 2 kilometers, on a rather busy road. And there was information before that someone had been following Ewelina. For some time they had seen a white car. It seems that Jacek was watching the girl, that he did it deliberately, that he probably saw her somewhere before and planned all of this. He waited for the right moment when there was simply no one on that road, and that's when he hit her. Well, he himself said it was an accident, but it seems that he was simply lying. After all that, the trial began in court. Jacek was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of applying for early release. After 35 years, so theoretically he could be released in 2046, but it's also not out of the question, because these kinds of situations do qualify, that he'll simply end up in a facility for so-called beasts. And he'll get a taste of all that. But it probably means a lot to this family, or even definitely, it's a kind of fate, because Ewelina, a 14-year-old girl, died on exactly the same day that her twin sister died 14 years earlier. That tragic day, December 8th, became doubly tragic for the family. I'd say it's an incredible kind of fate. From what I know, a year later, Ewelina's brother also died in a moped accident. All the siblings are buried in the same grave at the cemetery 1.5 kilometers from Soszewo. And that's the end of today's tragic story, a story that concerns a small town, the kind of place where, as I said, basically nothing ever happens. But as mathematics shows from time to time, stories like this just happen there. That's it for today's story. Of course, subscribe to our channel and of course, take care. That poison was in the stomach, in the intestines, and in the lungs. That man lived under one roof with a deadly threat, his own wife. The woman conducted chemical experiments on her husband, wanting to get rid of him. Her motive is surprising. It was a whole series of different kinds of experiments because they did the same thing every time. I mean, the same thing in the sense that they prepared those deadly sandwiches for him. Absolutely. Be sure to watch this special episode of Criminal Patrol, which is not publicly available. Subscribe to us now on HeroHeroCo/Criminal Patrol. It's a platform where we will regularly, on the first Tuesday of every month, publish additional exclusive materials that are not publicly available. In addition to bonus reports, you can also watch regular weekly episodes of Criminal Patrol there, but without ads. Go now to our profile on HeroHeroCo/Criminal and watch the film about the deadly poisonous wife.